You're sitting there right now, scrolling through your phone at 11 p.m., telling yourself you'll start tomorrow. But tomorrow looks exactly like today. You wake up with plans, with intentions, with that quiet voice inside your head saying, this is the day things change. And then by noon, you're back in the same loop. Same distractions, same excuses, same version of yourself you promised you'd leave behind. You're not lazy. You know you're not. You've got dreams that keep you awake at night. You've got ideas that excite you when no one's watching. But somewhere between the alarm clock and the mirror, something happens. The fire dims, the urgency fades, and you settle back into comfort like it's a warm bed you can't bring yourself to leave. You tell yourself it's just one more day, one more week, one more month of coasting. But deep down, you feel it. That gap between who you are and who you know you could be. It's getting wider. And the worst part? You're the only one who notices. No one's calling you out. No one's holding you accountable. You're just quietly disappointing yourself in ways that don't show up on social media. This isn't about motivation. This isn't about some productivity hack or morning routine that's going to save you. This is about something deeper. Something you've been avoiding because it's easier to blame your circumstances than to face the truth. The truth is, you're living wrong. Not because you're broken, but because you're holding on to habits that worked in your 20s but are suffocating you in your 30s. Successful people didn't figure this out because they were smarter or luckier. They figured it out because they got honest. They looked at their lives and made cuts. Hard cuts, the kind that hurt at first but set them free. And now, they're living differently. Not louder, not flashier, just freer. While you're still carrying weight that was never yours to carry. You keep waiting for the perfect moment to start, the perfect day, the perfect mood, the perfect alignment of circumstances that finally makes change feel easy. But that moment never comes. And while you're waiting, years pass. Opportunities fade. Ideas grow stale in your mind like fruit you never picked. You tell yourself you're being strategic, you're being smart, you're waiting until things settle down at work. Until the kids are older, until you have more money, more time, more energy. But the truth is, you're just postponing the discomfort of beginning. You're trading progress for the illusion of control. Successful people learned something you're still resisting. There is no perfect timing. There's only now and not now. And every time you choose not now, you're choosing the same life you already have, the same patterns, the same results. The same quiet regret that whispers to you when you're alone. Starting messy is still starting. Starting scared is still starting. Starting without knowing how it ends is still starting. But you've convinced yourself that if you can't do it perfectly, you shouldn't do it at all. So you don't. And another week disappears into the void of intention without action. They stopped waiting. They started before they felt ready, before they had all the answers. Before it made sense to anyone else. And that single decision, that willingness to begin in chaos, changed everything. Because momentum doesn't come from perfect conditions. It comes from imperfect motion. You're not waiting for the right time. You're waiting for courage you'll never feel until you move. And the longer you wait, the heavier the weight becomes. Until waiting itself becomes the habit. Until someday becomes never. Until you're looking back instead of forward. You're still measuring your worth by other people's reactions, the likes, the comments, the approval from people who don't know your name. You post something and then check back every few minutes to see if it landed, if they cared, if you matter. And when the validation comes, it feels good for a moment. A tiny hit of dopamine that fades before you even finish reading the notifications. But when it doesn't come, when the silence is louder than the praise, you spiral. You question everything. You wonder if you're enough. Successful people stopped playing that game. Not because they stopped caring about impact, but because they stopped letting strangers define their value. They built an internal compass that doesn't spin every time someone disagrees or ignores them. They found something stronger than applause to keep them going. You're giving away your power every time you need someone else to tell you you're on the right path. Every time you adjust your truth to fit their comfort. Every time you dim yourself to avoid their judgment. You're living on a stage you never auditioned for, performing for an audience that isn't even paying attention. They learned to validate themselves, to trust their own vision even when no one else could see it, to move in silence and let the results make the noise, not because they're arrogant, but because they're free. Free from the exhausting need to be understood by people who don't matter. You'll never build anything meaningful if you're constantly checking if everyone approves. You'll water down your work, your voice, your purpose, until it's so generic, so safe, that it disappears into the noise, and all you'll have left is the hollow comfort of fitting in. You're surrounded by the same people you knew 5 years ago. Same conversations, same complaints, same dreams that never leave the coffee shop where you talk about them. And you've started to notice something. You're becoming the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And that average is pulling you down. They're good people. You care about them. But they're not growing. They're not challenging you. They're not calling you higher. They're just there. Comfortable. Safe. Predictable. And every time you try to break out, to do something different, they pull you back with jokes or doubt disguised as concern. Successful people made a painful choice. They distanced themselves from people who kept them small, not out of cruelty, but out of self-preservation. They realized that loyalty to comfort was costing them their future. So they found new circles, uncomfortable circles, circles where they were the least accomplished person in the room. You're scared of being alone, scared of being judged for outgrowing people who knew you when you were different. So you stay. You pretend you're satisfied with surface-level friendships and conversations that go nowhere. But inside, you're dying of thirst for depth, for challenge, for connection with people who see where you're going, not just where you've been. They chose loneliness over mediocrity, and in that loneliness, they found something better. People who matched their ambition, people who inspired them instead of draining them. People who celebrated their wins without the hidden resentment that feels like a knife in the back. You can't grow in the same soil that kept you stagnant. You have to transplant yourself, even if it hurts. Even if it feels like betrayal. Even if you have to rebuild your entire social ecosystem from scratch. Because the price of staying is higher than the pain of leaving. Your screen time report is embarrassing. Hours every day scrolling through other people's lives, other people's work, other people's success. You consume content like it's oxygen, but you create nothing. You have ideas, but they stay locked in your notes app, buried under a mountain of saved articles you'll never read. You tell yourself you're learning, you're researching, you're staying informed. But the truth is, you're hiding. Hiding behind consumption because creation requires vulnerability. It requires you to put something into the world that might fail, that might be ignored, that might expose how much you still don't know. Successful people flipped the ratio. They started creating more than they consumed, not because their ideas were better, but because they valued output over input. They understood that one piece of imperfect work teaches you more than 100 hours of someone else's content. You're addicted to the passive comfort of being an audience member. It's easier to judge from the sidelines than to step onto the field. Easier to critique than to create. Easier to watch others build than to pick up your own tools and start. They got comfortable with being bad at first, with publishing work that wasn't ready, with sharing ideas that weren't fully formed, because they knew that waiting for perfection was just procrastination wearing a disguise. And every day they created, they got better. While you stayed the same. You're running out of time to be a spectator. Every hour you spend consuming is an hour you're not building, not practicing, not failing forward. You can't scroll your way to success. You can't Netflix your way to fulfillment. At some point, you have to close the app and make something. You're surviving Monday through Friday, not living. You hate your mornings. You drag yourself through work. You count down hours like a prisoner marking days on a wall. And then Friday hits, and for 48 hours, you pretend you're free. But Sunday night arrives like an executioner, and the cycle starts again. This is no way to spend a life. 5 days of suffering for 2 days of temporary relief. 5 days of being someone you don't recognize for 2 days of remembering who you used to be. You've accepted this trade without questioning if there's another way. Successful people rejected the weekend worship, not because they became workaholics, but because they redesigned their lives so that Monday didn't feel like a death sentence. They built work they didn't need to escape from, purpose they didn't need weekends to recover from. You're so busy surviving that you've forgotten to examine why you're miserable in the first place. You've normalized the exhaustion, the resentment, the quiet desperation that shows up every Sunday evening. You've convinced yourself this is just how adult life works. They made hard choices. They walked away from stability that was killing them slowly. They took pay cuts to gain freedom. They rebuilt their careers around meaning instead of money. And yes, it was terrifying. Yes, it was uncertain. But it was better than spending decades waiting for retirement to finally live. You don't need to escape your life every weekend if you build a life you don't want to escape from. That's not a luxury. That's not a fantasy. That's a choice you're avoiding because it requires courage you're not sure you have. You're drowning in obligations you never wanted. Projects you said yes to out of guilt, relationships you maintain out of habit, commitments that drain you because you couldn't bring yourself to say no. Your calendar is full, but your life feels empty. You think being busy means you're important, needed, valuable, but really you're just scattered, spread so thin that nothing gets your full attention, nothing gets your best work. Nothing gets the real you because you're too exhausted from being everything to everyone. Successful people became ruthless with their no. They protected their time like it was their most valuable asset. Because it is. They understood that every yes to something mediocre is a no to something extraordinary. So they started saying no without explanation, without guilt, without apology. You're scared of disappointing people, scared they'll think you're selfish or difficult or changed. So you carry their expectations like weights around your neck. You show up to things you don't want to attend. You help people who never help you back. You sacrifice your peace for their comfort. They learned that people who truly respect you will respect your boundaries. And people who don't? They were never meant to stay. Every boundary you set is an act of self-love. Every no is a yes to something that actually matters. You can't build anything meaningful if you're available to everyone all the time. You can't create if your energy is constantly leaking through 1,000 tiny holes. At some point, you have to choose yourself, even if it feels uncomfortable, even if it disappoints people who got used to you saying yes. You chose the paycheck over the purpose, the safe path over the scary one. You took the job that made sense on paper but hollowed you out inside. And now you're stuck. Golden handcuffs locked tight around wrists that ache to create something that matters. Every month, the money hits your account, and every month, a piece of your soul withdraws. You buy things to fill the void, distractions to numb the disappointment. But no amount of shopping can fix the feeling that you're wasting your one life doing work that doesn't need you specifically to do it. Successful people took the risk you're avoiding. They walked away from money that felt like a prison sentence. They bet on themselves when it didn't make financial sense, when family questioned them, when friends called them crazy. They chose meaning over safety because they understood that regret costs more than any salary. You tell yourself you'll do the meaningful work later, after you save enough, after you pay off the debt, after the kids are older. But later never comes. Later is a lie you tell yourself to avoid the discomfort of admitting you're scared. They started before they felt ready. They took pay cuts that made them nauseous. They lived smaller so they could dream bigger. And yes, there were months of panic, months of questioning, months of wondering if they made a terrible mistake. But on the other side of that fear was freedom. You're trading your life for money you'll spend trying to feel alive. That's not financial security. That's a slow death with a good benefits package. And one day, you'll wake up at 60 with a full bank account and an empty heart, wondering why you never took the leap. You're carrying resentment like a backpack full of rocks. unspoken truths, unexpressed boundaries, relationships that should have ended years ago, but you keep dragging them along because confrontation feels worse than suffering in silence. But the silence is killing you. You've convinced yourself that avoiding conflict is kindness, that keeping the peace is noble. But really, you're just scared of being disliked, scared of being misunderstood, scared of the temporary discomfort that comes from telling the truth. Successful people learned that difficult conversations are the price of authentic relationships. They stopped protecting other people's comfort at the expense of their own peace. They said the hard things, set the hard boundaries, ended the relationships that were only surviving on autopilot. You're pretending everything is fine when nothing is fine, smiling through pain, agreeing when you disagree, biting your tongue until it bleeds because you think that's what mature people do. But maturity isn't silence. It's courage to speak even when your voice shakes. They lost people when they started telling the truth. Some relationships couldn't survive honesty. Some people only wanted the version of them that never disagreed. And it hurt. But what hurt more was staying small to keep people comfortable. You're sacrificing your integrity to avoid awkwardness. But that awkwardness you're avoiding, it's temporary. The resentment you're building, that's permanent. It grows quietly until it explodes, until you become someone you don't recognize, bitter, exhausted, trapped in relationships built on lies of omission. You're scrolling through perfection every day and wondering why your life feels like a rough draft. Everyone else seems to have it figured out. Their careers, their relationships, their bodies, their happiness, and you're over here struggling with basics, feeling like you missed the manual everyone else got. But you're comparing your messy reality to their carefully curated fiction. You're seeing their wins without their failures, their success without their suffering, their highlight reel without the cutting room floor of doubt and fear and failure that got them there. Successful people stopped looking sideways. They stopped measuring their chapter 3 against someone else's chapter 20. They understood that comparison is the thief of joy and the killer of momentum. So they put blinders on. They focused on their own lane, their own pace, their own definition of success. You're letting strangers on the internet make you feel inadequate. People you don't know. People who are just as lost as you but better at hiding it. You're giving them power over your self-worth based on a 5-second glimpse into a life they've spent hours staging. They deleted the apps, unfollowed the accounts, created space from the constant comparison that was poisoning their progress. Not because they're antisocial, but because they're pro-sanity, pro-focus, pro-building something real instead of chasing someone else's illusion. You'll never be happy if your benchmark for success is someone else's performance. You'll always find someone richer, fitter, more accomplished, more loved. The game is rigged. The only way to win is to stop playing. You're holding on to people who show you exactly who they are, hoping they'll become who you need them to be. That friend who always cancels, that partner who promises to change but never does, that family member who drains you every time you talk. You keep giving chances like they're infinite. But people don't change because you need them to. They change because they want to. And most people, they're perfectly comfortable exactly as they are. Your disappointment isn't a catalyst for their transformation. It's just your disappointment. Successful people stopped waiting for others to evolve. They accepted people as they are right now, in this moment, without the future potential you're projecting onto them. And then they made a choice: stay or go. But they stopped living in the fantasy of who someone might become someday. You're exhausting yourself trying to fix people who don't think they're broken, trying to save people who don't want to be saved, trying to love people into being better when they've never asked for your rescue mission. They learned that acceptance isn't approval. You can accept someone exactly as they are and still choose to walk away. You can love someone and still protect yourself from them. You can wish them well from a distance instead of destroying yourself up close. You're not responsible for anyone's growth but your own. And every minute you spend trying to change someone else is a minute you're not spending changing yourself. Let them be. Let them go. Let them figure it out on their own time. Your job is to save yourself. But here's the truth nobody tells you. You already know what you need to do. You've known for months, maybe years. The awareness is there. The clarity is there. What's missing isn't information. It's decision. The decision to finally stop living wrong. To cut the habits that are comfortable but killing you. To become the person you've been avoiding because it requires too much from you. Successful people aren't smarter than you. They just got tired of their own excuses faster. They hit a point where staying the same hurt more than changing, and they moved. So the question isn't what you should do. You know what you should do. The question is, when will the pain of staying finally outweigh the fear of leaving? When will you stop waiting? When will you choose yourself? Because nobody's coming to save you. No perfect moment is arriving. No sign from the universe will make it easier. It's just you, and the choice you make right now. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment below. So what's it going to be?